Just so we are on the same page, this one's gonna be a rough one-taker and most of all brutally honest, just because I see no other way to do this. And that's why right off the bat I'm gonna start with a disclaimer. Doogee did approach me to review the Doogee Mix 2. And that's already my first bone I have to pick with them, because right after asking me if I wanted to review it, you can't just ask me to make a positive review, unboxing and also some promotion videos to get as many views as possible. Because in my opinion, the positive review part is absolutely unethical and absolutely a no-go. And that's why in some way I kinda get why people call it Doogee instead of Doogee or Doogee. Doesn't really matter what the brand name is called, and it also will have no impact, just to be clear, on the product's review. Okay, but in some way I just have to address this in a little bit more of a critical way, because what happened with the Doogee Mix 1. Because we have seen so many videos, and I can't call this reviews, from big, very popular YouTubers, which otherwise would have never taken a single look at this phone unless some serious money was flowing. Which I definitely did not get, just to be clear on that part. And the second bone I have to pick with is with Dave2D or Dave Lee, what he said in his review about the display. I will get into that in the display part, but for right now, let's get into the design and build quality. First of all, a size comparison, because this is a 6-inch phone with 2x1. Which, fortunately enough, the Mix 2 that I have here as well is. As you can see, it is noticeably taller, but actually therefore a little bit more narrow, since the Mix 2 has quite big side bezels and it's a little bit thicker since it has a bigger battery. Of course, this one maybe feels somewhere premium because it's also like double the price or twice the price, but this one, I have to just give it to it. In terms of build quality, is superb in some way, because super solid, great metal frame, and also very solid feeling back. It is definitely not Gorilla Glass or something like that, because Gorilla Glass 5 would actually feel like plastic. This one doesn't, so it's maybe an older version or whatever it is. It does attract a lot of fingerprints, just as the front. Both actually out of the box came with screen protectors or glass protectors. I took them off to see how good the coating is, and it's fine. It can be quite easily wiped away, so all good in that regard. The only thing in terms of build quality that's not good are the buttons, because they are a little bit too mushy, too deep in the device. The position is okay, but you don't really get quite the tactile feedback. Now the fingerprint reader, I've heard from people it's not that good. It was reliable in my experience. Of course, as you can see here, it's not the very fastest one, but it is reliable, and once you take it out of a pocket, it was mostly quite fine. But other than that, nice transitions over, nothing feels sharp and feels good. It has though an excellent premium heft if you like that, because with 220 grams, this thing is heavy. Absolutely heavy. For many people already too heavy. I like a premium heft, but even here I have to say this is almost too much. Even though I have to say, due to being quite narrow, it's easy to handle. And if you check the bezels, these are still moderate. Of course, it's a tall device and there are some side bezels. And one thing that I don't like as much, if you check their site and check my bezels and what they promoted on their site, they promoted a completely different device, because they showed way smaller bezels. Otherwise, everything, as you can see here, is raised up a little bit. The two cams, which this one just has to be fake because it doesn't seem to do anything. The two LED flash. We have a dual SIM slot, but also a shared one with SD card. Then nothing on this side. Here we have the speaker, USB-C, and the microphone, notification LED, the two cameras, no capacitive buttons. And I just have to say, in terms of build quality, it actually feels very premium. And the design isn't bad at all. So here I can't really complain. Not really. Now the display. Here is where I have to pick a bone. Because what's still great, mirror vision and all that, you can customize pretty much everything in the mirror vision settings. So contrast and so on, which you should do, because colors out of the box were a little bit wrong. But talking already about colors, I just have to mention that. What Dave2D said in his review, and he even showed this on his backlist, was that it was an AMOLED display. It is not. That is just wrong, and I'm gonna prove you that is not, and show you why I think that is actually so wrong. Because I made some screenshots of our conversation, and it's nice that he actually replied, but here is what I said. I said, how can you say it's an AMOLED panel? It's clearly not an AMOLED panel. He said, this backlist in the box, which I didn't have, and on their site, which I didn't find anything about that as well, labels it as an AMOLED panel. Is it not? Why does he ask me this if he reviewed this? And then he said, it's obviously not as good as the Note 8 screen, but it looks very good and the blacks are pitch black, which is completely just not true. Now my answer was, unless you got a different unit, then they sent me it's not an AMOLED panel. Just check the screen on off angle. it clearly shows IPS glow, something an AMOLED panel would never do. The difference between AMOLED and IPS can be seen within seconds. Best test black, and then I explained to you how to test it. What he then answered is, as you can see, I spent some more time examining the screen, which I almost can't believe, because then he says the display on my unit looks almost identical in panel characteristics to the original Doogee mix. It looks like an AMOLED to me. The colors look too saturated to be an IPS panel. The reviewer guide, and then he always refers to that again. Now, here is what's completely other bullshit. The colors look too saturated to be an IPS panel. You can oversaturate any panel, no matter what tech. And you can also make every AMOLED panel very realistic. Most companies just don't use that. Usually they tend to make IPS devices more natural and AMOLEDs more saturated, but you can. And that's why I'm starting to question his knowledge, because someone who reviews so many devices with displays, this is weird. And then I said, did you check the black on angles? AMOLED doesn't have IPS glare. That's simple to check. And he says, yup, I don't see any, even on pure black. Once again, pure utter BS. And I don't want to say that he did it on purpose, but I asked Doogee just to confirm that to me, and they said he was wrong. It is an IPS display. Now something else was said, because maybe sometime in the past it was maybe announced as an AMOLED, but it's just wrong. And as a reviewer, all he would have had to do is go to something black, do it on angle, and then he would have seen the IPS glow. And even though I have to say the IPS glow on this device is actually really good, and the way my camera is set up right now, you can't really even see it. But IPS glow just shows it's an IPS display, and it has IPS glow. There are no pitch blacks, not off angle. And that's my beef, because otherwise the display is really good. And I agree with him. It's a really lovely panel. It's a little bit off in terms of calibration. I think, if I can remember quite right, it was way too warm. I set it colder. But colors are nice once you calibrate a little bit. Sharpness is fine. Viewing angles okay. Even though brightness of just around 420 lux is just too low. So before I'm going back to the normal review, I cannot understand how a YouTuber that big can make such a crucial issue, because I'm gonna be the last one to say I don't make mistakes. I make more mistakes than anyone else, but not something as crucial as getting the display tag wrong. If you have used this device actually more than an hour, you would have noticed this. I've seen this within seconds, because the first thing that I do on every device is actually use it off angle, just to check to be sure it's the right panel, because I've already had devices with wrong spec lists as well. So this is just a no-go, and it makes me question a lot of what I've seen from him now. But let's get past all of that and go to the sound. The sound is decent. It's okay. It's nothing really more, because it's definitely not loud. It could definitely be louder. In most situations it was okay, but it's quite a tinny, quite a shallow, and not a very well balanced sound. So definitely not high quality. It gets the bare minimum basics done, but that's all about it. The headphone jack is okay as well. Now about the performance, I have to get into one thing. If we go into the battery settings, there is a sports mode and a normal mode. I used it in sports mode all the time, because from other devices I know it doesn't really drain much more, but it definitely gives you the better experience. And as you can see, if I quickly end all apps, 6 gigs of RAM by the way, app launch times are okay. Sometimes it definitely has some hesitation. Sometimes an app can take like 1, 2, even 3 seconds to get ready, but it's usually okay in normal use. And I would actually even say that from a just normal use perspective, this is, if running well, which right now it still caches, is on about the Snapdragon 625 level. If it's really smooth, actually a little bit above that, but it's just not nearly as consistent, because I see way more minor lag, which could just be because they used some lower grade RAM or something like that, because I've seen the 625 already perform more consistent. So it seems to me like if you don't do anything and then you move, it kind of already goes into a low state mode, and then it kind of has to go back, and then you see some minor lag until it catches up again. But overall I have to say it's a nice device. It's mostly smooth, but the kind of regular, not really occasional lag is there. And of course multitasking is good, but yeah, I don't really want to go too much into that. It is a solid performer, and I would actually still almost give it a very good, but I will give it a really good, because to make a distinctive difference to the Snapdragon 625, which is just more consistent, gaming performance was also quite fine. Now battery. I actually did not really bother to charge because it is not a quick charger, but from what I know, usually with that size, it should be at around 3 hours, maybe a little bit above that, which is quite long. The battery life, though, I have to say, you would expect it to be very, very good. It's still great in my opinion, because what I had is in normal mobile data use 6 hours. 5.5 to maybe 6.5, somewhere in between, but usually more like 5.5 to 6. That is already great for me. On Wi-Fi, I would say like 8 hours. Of course, with that battery, we would expect even more, but that's with maybe a Snapdragon 625, which is super efficient. So the Helio P25, just because it isn't as efficient, needs a bigger battery. So you can't just say big battery, great battery life, even though it is in this case, but not as I would have expected. With a 625, this would have been really good. But other than that, what else? Reception, I've heard some bad things about. I had no issues with Wi-Fi, with data connectivity a little bit, because at some spots it was a little bit not that great, but also not a huge issue. Now, software. Launcher, quick settings are kind of normal, but definitely a little bit themed. But it's not what I've seen on a Doogee Mix, so they definitely toned it down. This now looks way closer to stock, and not maybe quite in terms of looks, but definitely in terms of overall feel. As you can see, 711 and everything else is here. In terms of extra settings, you get options like, for example, to change the layout here. Full screen mode can be changed, a few things. There is not a whole lot of things going on, which is okay. It has what you would need. Gesture motions are there, system motions for free finger, and so yeah, double tap to lock the screen, which is actually quite cool. Double tap on the home button and it will lock. That's actually quite handy. Other than that, though, I don't really want to say too much, besides the fact that I got, I think, 2 updates in the week that I had it. The problem is, though, I can't really say, because I've never used a device like this for a longer period of time, of how long you will get updates. That's usually an issue, especially Oreo or something like that, but software seems clean. The only issue that I had was, for some reason, Gmail crashed very often on me, like multiple times after another, and once I closed it, then it was fine for a few hours, and then it happened sometimes, but it was annoying. Maybe a factory reset would have fixed it, but I don't know. Now, let's get into the camera. Just a real quick look at the software, which is nothing to really brag about, because we have modes: video, photo, face beauty, blur, mono, panorama, and pro. Pro offers the typical stuff like ISO and so on. And if we go back to, which as you can see definitely doesn't work all that intuitive. It's a little bit of a clumsy software. Here we have the settings, which aren't many. Video quality can be changed. 1080p is the maximum. Microphone, GPS location, HDR mode, a little bit of a weird way to access it. Switch to the display, the camera. So that's actually already pretty much it. So let's check what the camera actually offers. Now, when it comes to the pictures, I have to actually say of the front-facing cam, they are not bad. Okay, there is a wide one, as you can see here, but completely different colors. It's way more soft, quite blurry, so the wide angle you should not use. But the front angle actually, or I mean the normal angle actually can produce some nice shots. I was actually surprised. This is really good in my opinion, because color seem fine, and I did not have the best light for sure. Indoors, yeah, definitely falls apart, just because the low light capabilities are not that great, as you can see here. Also video in darkness and so on, but outside it was fine. But as you can see, forget the wide angle, like I said. Now low light, as you can see already, without the flash, not usable. With the flash it works, but not great, and it's just way too soft. I'm not quite sure about this kind of haze over the camera all the time. I did clean the lens, don't worry about that, but as you can see, not great at all. With good lighting, okay. And like I said, I don't think the second camera actually does anything. So now I want to quickly get through a few pictures. If you have really good lighting, you can get definitely some decent shots. White balance isn't always correct, but as you can see, delivers. Okay, forget the portrait mode. That's nothing, because it's just a fake one anyways. But pics are usable, but it's not a great experience. It really heavily depends on the light. The moment you don't have the greatest light, you don't get even decent shots. So that's just where I'm gonna leave it. Real quick, for those who want to see the video on the front facing cam, it's actually not good at all. As you can see, it limits at 720p, and as you can see here to 720p, yeah, no thank you. Also, the audio wasn't all that great. Outdoors, things didn't look better at all anyways. White balance was quite off. It was a little bit jittery and so on. So I think we can just skip that and check the main cam, which also is not good, because The autofocus was hunting all the time, and I'm not even going into that. The 1080p is very blurry, very soft. The autofocus, no. The moment you move it, it tries to hunt for something, and it's just, yeah, I would say let's just forget that. And let's get to the quick summary out of my head, because I don't want to spend too much time on it to keep the review, even though it's way too long because of the display part. Build quality, I really like. No problems here at all besides the buttons. The design actually feels good. In the one hand, usability was okay. The display is actually really good. Maybe even not very good, even though not AMOLED good. Even though an IPS display can be just as good. As you have seen, it can fool a million big channel. Speaker, not really good, decent at all. At best, headphone jack is okay. Performance is really good actually. A little bit more lag than some better optimized phones, but the normal use was fine. Battery life was great, software was clean, and the camera, I guess the camera, which is so important for so many people already, is the deal breaker. Because if we get to the final conclusion, this phone, $200, 170 euros, I've seen it already, actually isn't that bad. And I could recommend it if there would be just not better alternatives, because in the US you can get something like an Honor 7X, which has the way better camera. Okay, not even the display is better actually, and the build quality, but it's a little bit smaller, it's a little bit more approachable. Software isn't all that great, but overall I would definitely prefer this over something like this, because the camera for most people will be better. The performance will be a little bit more consistent. Battery life will be the worst though, because this shows this phone, if you have seen all my specific categories, isn't all that bad. I can't hype it at all, not at all, absolutely not, but I can't really trash it, because it's not bad. The only thing that I think for most people will be a total deal breaker will be the camera, because decent at best, you can get a Xiaomi Mi A1 that has a really good camera, also top battery life, a decent screen and all these kind of things, and a LiDAR package, for example, a better fingerprint reader and such. So there is competition these days. And not bad. Not sure what else to say. It's not bad, but I actually was fine the time I used it during my experience. Absolutely. And I could, like I said, I could actually even recommend it, because I don't see, because I have no beef with people, because I've seen some, I heard at least that some reviewers have praised this phone a little bit too much. Just saying, maybe, I don't know. And then some said, don't let them fool you. Which also doesn't seem to be 100% fair, because the device's qualities are there. Besides, like I said, the camera. So I think it's somewhere in between. And since I don't really know what else to say, and this review has been way too long, they could have done worse, but the whole surrounding controversy about this phone, with the way they approached me, with the way reviewers handle this device, and reviewers who usually never review something like this, is just what gives me a little bit of a weird taste in my mouth.